Well, it's a good morning from him, and of course it's a very good morning from me. Welcome to my mortgage live stream. Hope you're well, hope that all is good with you. Let's go on air so that we can show that this is live. I'm not an avatar, although you may want to prefer an avatar, I don't know. But maybe that's for the future. We'll wait and see. So this is all about mortgage advisors, CPD, financial advisors, CPD, about self-development, all those good things. And today I've got a couple of topics for you. One on how you introduce yourself to your customer, that's coming later, but also one on the Residence Nil Rate Band, which is like a nice little update for you. But I've gone like deep undercover on this one, a bit more detail for you that you need because customers ask about it and people are very inquisitive about the Residence Nil Rate Band. So we've got that coming up for you as well. In fact, why don't I go straight over to the first topic with you and wish you a great week as I progress to the whiteboard. So let's pop across here. Now, this is one I prepared earlier. As you can see, Residence Nil Rate Band. It's residence, not resident. So let's just get the name right. And we always love an acronym in our sector, the RNRB, which is not the guys that rescue people when they fall in the water at the sea. It's the Residence Nil Rate Band. So just in case you get that one confused. So what is the Residence Nil Rate Band? Well, in a nutshell, what it's designed to do is to help people who are passing on their wealth to their children or grandchildren to avoid some inheritance tax legally, and it allows you to reduce your inheritance tax bill if you've got a main residence passing through the generations. That's the whole point behind it. The intention, I think, was not to sell the main residence so that it keeps a property alive in the family. I don't know, but it worked. Came about a few years ago. So what does it mean in a sense? So let's just draw some pickies up here for you. Well, as you can appreciate, you need to have a house. You need to have a main residence, which is part of your estate. And we'll come on to the numbers in a second. So that's your main residence. So I'll just put in there your main residence. Now, it has to be your main residence. It could be rented out now, or the owners could be in a care home, but it's had to have been your main residence at some point. That's an important point to make, because maybe we rented and they might have gone into care or something before they die. So that's your main residence. It can be in the UK or abroad. So obviously most of them are in the UK. It can be abroad as well. And it could also be a houseboat or a caravan. Not a lot of people know that. But anyway, it's your main residence. And what happens here is if the owners of the property die, so both obviously if it's jointly owned would need to die, and they're passing the property and the rest of their estate onto their children or grandchildren. So here you've got your children. There's just a little picture there for you. A bit upset. And there's the grandchildren who, I suppose, are smaller, aren't they? It can't be anybody else. So if you're passing your estate on to somebody else, it doesn't count. It has to go to your children or your grandchildren. And if you're doing that, then it allows you to increase your nil rate band effectively. So let's just take a look at the numbers over here. So let's just do our little number thing for inheritance tax, different colour pen to brighten it up for you. Now, as you know, of course, with inheritance tax, if you pass on your estate, there's what's called a nil rate band, and the nil rate band gives you up to £325,000 off of your inheritance tax bill. It's what they call the nil rate band. So that's at 0%. That's the whole point behind it. Now, the residence nil rate band gives you an extra amount on top of that. So let's put that in there for you. So this gives you an extra nil rate band effectively. And the extra nil rate band gets added into or added on top of the nil rate band. That gives you another 175,000. There you go. So effectively, therefore, complete the picture for you so you can see where we're going. Effectively, therefore, you have a total of 500,000, which is taxed at 0%. So that's a really good thing. Can't argue that, can you? Now that is per person. So individuals have their own nil rate band. So let's just take a look at the situation there, for example. So if you've got the people that died here, what happens? Let's say it's a couple. They need to be a civil partnership or married. There you go. What happens here is the first person to die before the house is sold, obviously, will pass their assets over to their spouse, and of course they don't have to pay inheritance tax. So both nil rate bands get transferred across. So the nil rate band and the residence nil rate band get passed over to the next person who can then add that to their nil rate band and residence nil rate band. So effectively, when the second person dies and the house then goes to the children, this person has probably got two sets of nil rate bands. One passed over from their spouse when they died, and the one that they're entitled to. Now, when you see a question on this one, it's not the amount that's transferred over, it's the fact that 100% of the nil rate band is passed over. So if the numbers go up in the future, and maybe 10 years later, these are higher, then they will still get 100% of the nil rate band at the time. Okay, makes sense. Makes absolute sense. So let's just have a look at some of the numbers and some of the exceptions, etc., to the rule here. So we've got this property being passed on to the children or grandchildren, and you're getting this extra 175 grand times 2 if there's 2 of you. But it's not for mega rich people. What they say is if your estate, so that's the whole lot that you're passing along, is more than 2 million, which actually isn't an awful lot of money. Take into account a very large house couldn't itself be worth, half, 1 million, 1.2 million, whatever, if it's in certain parts of the UK. But if your estate's worth 2 million, then you will lose your residence nil rate band. And you can't really argue with that. That's how taxation works, isn't it? But you don't lose it completely. It's the usual rule of £1 per £2 over the limit. So for every £2 over the estate, you lose £1 of your residence nil rate band. So as you can probably appreciate, if you had your estate was £350,000 more, then you will lose the entire thing. So it's gone. There you go. Ta-da! Little upset face there. So it doesn't apply to every single estate, as you can imagine it wouldn't be. The other issue to think about, and I'm going to dive into this in a little bit of detail for you, are trusts. Now, the exam talks about trusts a little bit as well. Your advanced exams talk about trusts. We normally talk about trusts with life policies, don't we, where people put a life assurance policy into trust and that passes over to the next of kin free of tax. Now, some people put property into trust, and this is where it gets problematic. So if your main residence, there you go, let's put your little main residence in there for you. Dodgy chimney there, isn't it? If your main residence is in a trust, effectively what you're doing is you're putting a trust around the property, and you're going to say, look, when we die, when we're dead, the proceeds of the trust go to our children, that they will be the beneficiaries of the trust. Now, you'll lose it if you do put it into trust, a certain type of trust. You'll lose the residence nil rate band. The only type of trust which you will lose it is what's called the discretionary trust. Now, we've got another video on this later for you when we look at life assurance. But if it's a discretionary trust, think about the word there. A discretionary trust means that the trustees have discretion as to who they will pay it to. So this house is in trust. Essentially, when the people have died, they're living in the house, by the way, because they're still alive. But when they die, the house goes to the children. It's in trust. It's outside of the estate. So it's trying to come out of all of this business, you see. But if it's a discretionary trust, in other words, the trustees have complete discretion as to where it goes, then you don't get your residence nil rate band. You lose it, which is unfortunate. So for that situation, there's no residence nil rate band. So that's worth mentioning in the video there for you as well. If, however, it's what's known as an absolute trust or an interest in possession trust, then you do get to keep the residence nil rate band. Now, an absolute trust or a interest in possession trust, think about the words there. In other words, the person who's going to get it is already written down in the trust deed, effectively. The absolute trust is the children. If it's an interest in possession, it will be the children. So because it's going to go to the children anyway, they let you keep the nil rate band. So if it's an absolute trust, that's the important one, or interest in possession, then you get to keep it. Remember, it's all about the property going to the kids, and here the property will go to the kids. So if it's discretionary, you see, they might send it to Uncle Albert, for example, or somebody else like that. It's worth talking about that as well. I do have a little clip for you on family protection trust, just to keep you informed of this, because as a mortgage advisor, you will come across people who talk about this sort of stuff, especially if you get involved in equity release. But as far as the residence nil rate band is concerned, that's it. Hope that's been useful. Bye. I did promise I'd have a quick look at the Family Protection Trust, which I will do. This is not in CeMAP, so you won't get tested about this, but any advanced questions you might do. But hey, guys, if you're going to be a mortgage advisor and if a client says to you, well, what's this Family Protection Trust? You said, I don't know, it wasn't in the syllabus. There wasn't an exam question on it. It doesn't go down so well, does it? So Family Protection Trust, what exactly is it? Just to update you, really. Well, as we said before, you've got the person here who owns the assets. Let's just keep it to one person, do we, to make it nice and easier. They own an estate, and their estate might consist of a property. It might consist of shares or money or whatever. It doesn't really matter. And what they do is they put their assets into a trust whilst they're alive. It's called a family protection trust. So we talk about life insurance a lot, don't we, putting them into trust? But this is putting everything into trust. So effectively, the person who puts in the trust, and we call those people now the settlor, that's just a technical name for it. This is the person who owns all these assets. He or she gets to live in them and look after them, etc., and enjoy them. But they no longer own the asset. That's the key thing. They no longer own it, any of those assets, but they can use it because that's what they do. And what happens here is you're trying to prevent these assets from being taken by other people. Now, just to finish off the story, what happens to the trust is that they're written as a discretionary trust. Here we go, discretionary, which means that the trustees have discretion as to who gets the money. So on your death, you're gone. The trustees, whoever they are, friends, brothers, solicitors, then decide who it's going to go to. And they would normally pass it on to the beneficiaries, which is probably the family. There you go. It's probably the family, kids, whatever. That's who they would normally pass it on to. But it's up to them what they do. So you've got to appoint people, trustees, who are going to look after it for you. And of course, the trustees manage the trust as well. Trustees here, they manage the trust whilst it's in place. And when you die, they pass it on to the beneficiaries. Pretty much how it works. Now, the whole point behind it is that you're trying to shield these assets from baddies. Okay, who are the baddies? Well, you've got care costs in the form of the local council. If you need to go into care whilst you're alive, of course, they may take the property and spend it to pay for the care. Creditors, you might be trying to keep it. So a divorce situation, you might find that's quite useful. Inheritance tax, you're trying to shield yourself from inheritance tax because all of these assets go straight to the kids outside of inheritance tax. The problem is, though, that if you did that, you're not going to get the Residence Nil Rate Band, which we talked about before. Remember, this is a discretionary trust. So although you're shielding the assets from inheritance tax, you're reducing your nil rate band there because of what you've set up. Other disadvantages is that you would lose control of the assets, of course, because the trustees look after them, don't they? There will be some inheritance tax because of you're losing the Residence Nil Rate Band as well. And there is some taxation as well. There's taxation implications, which we'll talk about on another video for you. So that's just the basics of a family protection trust, if you ever find somebody who's organising that with their property. And if they are, there's no way they can do equity release, by the way, because they don't own the asset anymore, do they? So the lender's not going to equity release that property. So be careful if people do take these things out. Just wanted to give you an update on that one. Well done. Okay, a couple of technical things there for you, particularly on the Residence Nil Rate Band, which I think is quite useful, isn't it? What I want to do now is talk to you about one of our little sales ideas, as we always do, don't we? We always give you a sales idea or two. Now, this one's called Job Titles Are Merely for Pay Grades. Now, job titles are merely for pay grades was thrust at me 25 years ago today, actually, as I resigned from my secure corporate role at an insurance company and took to self-employment. I'd never seen job titles like that before, but it makes sense when you consider that most people mention their job titles when introducing themselves to potential clients. Over the last 25 years, though, I've learned how to introduce myself properly and get a conversation. I do it in a number of ways. I might start by who I am, what do I do, who do I help? Sometimes I talk about my backstory, where I started and why do I do what I do. Sometimes I mention the value I can bring, achieving various KPIs, speeding things up, or saving people money. So some of those advantages come through too. Recently, actually, I've simplified it even more. And now I say to people, do you know Martin Lewis? And I say, well, I do what he does, but for financial advisors, not the public. People get it every time now. But I used to give my job title, which is very bad. Naturally, of course, you may have some regulatory words to add, but beware, don't bamboozle your customer with too much compliance science. The FCA regulator, of course, is the industry watchdog. Being whole of market means you can source the right mortgage or the right finance from hundreds of different lenders. Scrap the jargon is the mantra. Now, my final corporate title was Senior Financial Services Training Manager. I was so proud of that title. But when you see it now, it's a mouthful. It's irrelevant to anybody else but the payroll staff who PAYE'd my salary on the 25th of every month. That security, of course, was gone, and I welcomed the uncertainty and excitement of self-employment. There you go. Nice little sales idea there for you to get you thinking about how you introduce yourself. Okay, we're going to wrap up now, nice and short and sweet. We're into June now, aren't we? Summer's blazing, as they say. Last term for kids, last half term for kids before they break up in July. So let's look at June, July, August, get ourselves ready for a busy autumn, shall we? We'll wait and see on that one. As always, we've got lots of things going on at Arch Towers. Just to let you know, of course, if you want to, you can get onto our mailing list. I always promote that every time, don't we? There's the QR code, which gets you onto the mailing list. What are we doing over the next few months? Well, we've got some really good initiatives around equity release. We're producing some new material on equity release, getting the YouTube channel pumped up with videos, and getting some workshops organised for the autumn. If you're really, really busy and you want to pass equity release exam, then we're going to run a one-day workshop, which with fewer bits and pieces will let you pass the exam pretty much the next day. So we're very excited about that one as well. So lots of things coming up. We've got some books on special offers as well. So get on that mailing list. There it is. And make sure you come on our mailing and we can keep you informed with what's going on. Other than that, I wish you a fantastic week. Enjoy the weather. Apparently we're on for a heat wave, and the Met Office said that, not me. So that's something to look forward to, isn't it? A heat wave. Anyway, see you next week. Bye.